Go.
In 2008, the United States experienced one of, if not the largest, financial crises in the history. Although not many people actually know what caused this crisis. So today I want to tell you the causes of this crisis, and I want you to realize how unethical business decision making led to this crisis. So I got this information from my business ethics class, and it's motivated me to tell others about it. I will tell you about deregulation in the 90s. I will tell you about how the housing industry also played a huge role in the crisis, the introduction of mortgage-backed securities, what those are, collateralized debt obligations and other derivatives, and how they were just handed out to people. How rates for interest on loans began to increase and people could no longer pay for loans, and how that created a bubble, and eventually how that bubble popped. So in the 90s, it began with deregulation in the financial sector. And this happened under the Clinton administration, which began to lead to unethical decision making. So the Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act, probably never heard of it, but according to the Time article titled "The 25 People to Blame for the Financial Crisis," it repealed the Glass-Steagall Act, which was a set of regulatory laws that actually helped the U.S. out of the Great Depression. So it's kind of important that we had the Glass-Steagall Act, but now we no longer have it. Clinton would also loosen laws on the housing industry, which led to many people acquiring loans for brand new houses. The housing bubble would actually start in Iceland, where banks would become private, which means they were government owned, and now governments take over these banks and they're giving out loans like they're candy on Halloween. So eventually, anyone and everyone could have the house of their dreams to little or no risk at all. And banks, there was no risk at all giving out a loan, which is very dangerous. So according to Investopedia, banks were giving out subprime mortgages to people who did not have the best credit scores. People were getting loans and only had to pay a small amount on these loans, so they were really attractive to people. They didn't have to pay much. They could have the biggest and nicest houses. And so now the question is, if banks are giving out loans, which are an investment, which should be risky, why are they not risky? Well, mortgage-backed securities allowed banks to give out loans to individuals and then immediately sell those loans to an investment bank. So no longer are they have any risk in giving out a loan. It's not even on their plate anymore. They've sold this loan to somebody else and it's not even a concern for them. So Kimberly Amadeo, author of Mortgage-Backed Securities, Their Types and How They Work, explains how banks used instruments like mortgage-backed securities and other debt obligations to attract people to apply and get loans for no risk involved for the customer or the banker. So not only were banks selling loans to investment banks, but they were using derivatives to make bets on the person that actually got the loan. So when somebody would get a loan, the bank would make a bet that they were not going to pay off the loan. And then whenever the person did not pay off the loan, they made millions of dollars. So this game, as you can see, it sounds dangerous and it's highly unethical. So the lending that banks were getting into made this bubble grow. So you had this giant bubble that was just waiting to pop. The loans that people were accepting from banks, after a few years, the interest rates on them would rise back up to normal rates, and now people can no longer pay for these loans. So as I previously stated, banks were okay with this as they gained millions of dollars from the bets they placed previously. As stated in the article, the 2008 housing crisis, there was a lack of government intervention in the housing and financial industries, which ultimately created the bubble that was waiting to pop. So the bubble finally pops in 2008 when interest rates on the loans that people were given rose drastically. People could no longer afford these loans and were left having to foreclose on their homes. So the balance states that since absolutely nobody could afford these loans, banks no longer had money coming in. nobody's giving them money, they no longer have any money at all, so they're forced to file for bankruptcy. So these banks are going bankrupt, but the government comes in and saves them. And why? Well, according to a Bloomberg article, these banks were too big to fail, which means if they would have failed, if they would have gone bankrupt, then our economy would we would probably not be living the best lives right now. These banks are like Chase, all the big banks you've ever heard of, it's all them. Furthermore, there was no punishment for those people who got us into the financial crisis. They walked away with millions, even billions of dollars. People in the bottom level of, these giant buildings that were like janitors are making millions and billions now. And it's just because they cheated people into giving them their money. So now you have an understanding of how unethical decision-making of the US government and large banks caused the financial crisis in 2008. I shared with you the effects of deregulation in the 90s, how the housing industry was also deregulated, what mortgage-backed securities are and their effects, and how this led to the creation and ultimately the popping of this bubble. And you may ask, has anything changed? The answer to this is actually no. The scary thing is it could happen again because there's still no laws preventing these people from doing the same exact thing again. Thank you.